Welcome, my dear friends. It is fortuitous to see you. In case we haven't been introduced, I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an enjoyer of big brain activities in general. On this channel, I perform dramatic story readings, I provide role-playing game and movie reviews, and I get to talk to interesting people. In this episode, we're going to be doing two of those things because I'm going to be reviewing adventure module Hanging Coffins of the Vampire Queen. And since it's a relatively new and independently published adventure module, I have the pleasure of speaking with its creator about his inspirations behind making this thing. Published by Dark Wizard Games, Hanging Coffins is an adventure for higher level characters. Designed for the OSRIC system, it is compatible with basically any old school Dungeons & Dragons setup. There is also a 5th edition version of the module available, but I'm sticking with the old school version because that's what I like and the version I read. And this review is also based off of the most recent PDF available for the module because there's slight differences between previous printings and the PDF versus the physical copy. So in case you're wanting to follow along at home, everything I show you will be coming from the PDF. While this fits the description of funhouse dungeon, it's really a grindhouse dungeon. And that's a term I just came up with because it's a funhouse dungeon if it were directed by, say, Rob Zombie. Now let's see how this thing sells itself. The Vampire Queen has assembled a team of her worst prisoners for a little game. Together, you strangers face a simple choice: death or freedom. She has challenged your daring band of adventurers to run the gauntlet of her wicked dungeon lair using all your original weapons, magic items, and possessions. You must survive terrible traps, beastly monsters, even each other as you outwit and fight your way through all the horrific surprises she has arranged. Fortune and glory await those brave souls who can escape from the hanging coffins of the Vampire Queen. Maximum Mayhem dungeons are fun to play and have that classic look and feel, including blue maps, removable covers, and fantasy art from some of the best artists in the business, filled with diabolical villains, irreverent characters, over-the-top monster encounters, outrageous magic, mischievous NPCs, traps, puzzles, and more. This adventure will entertain and challenge everyone who dares to play it. On the front cover and credits page, we see the editor-in-chief and writer of the adventure is Mark Taormino, a software designer, frequent bit part actor, and passionate game designer. The founder and lead man at Dark Wizard Games, Mark has churned out 8 adventures and more supplements. And in this excellent interview with Matt Finch, designer of old school clone systems, swords, and wizardry, he confessed that his goal was to make new adventures that fit the feel of the original generation of modules. I recommend the Finch interview for your watching enjoyment. And while I've only read this Dark Wizard module, I believe he succeeded in capturing the glory days feel. As I mentioned, he's been in a lot of low-budget movies, and on his YouTube channel, he posts scenes and acting reels, and he has a separate channel for Dark Wizard Games itself. He's done a number of successful Kickstarters. Seems like an interesting dude, and I hope to do a full interview with him in the future to find out more. It seems Mark has a kindred spirit in Alan Chamberlain, credited for graphic design and layout. According to this LinkedIn page, Alan is a freelance editor and VFX artist, and he also lists being the art director for Dark Wizard Games on his CV. His IMDb page shows 37 credits, mostly as visual effect artist or supervisor of the same. With cartography by Alyssa Fadden, the map was good. It's easy to follow, creative in places, has a legend, compass, and scale indicator. It shows you do have options on how to navigate the dungeon, so it's not strictly a railroad. Her website states she's been map making professionally since 2012 and has worked with quality outfits like Frog God Games, Kobold Press, and more. She wears her geek with pride and thinks of Rome all the time, so she must be cool. Seriously, she's got neat stuff to talk about on her website. Check it out. While the thematic front cover art is by Jeff D., a pissy atheist and legend of the RPG art scene who we've talked about before, there is a plethora of artists attached here. Normally, that would give me cause for concern because many artists produce a disjointed vision of what the overall work will look like, but in this case, it did not bother me in the slightest. Why, you may ask? Well, that's because this module may have the best collection of art I've seen in any RPG module. Even if this adventure was complete crap, the art alone would be worth the price of admission. And believe me, I'm going to show you later on. You're going to see what I'm talking about. While the Jeff D cover art is good, it pales in comparison to some of the masterworks we get in this thing. In the digital promo copy I received from Mark, I found this alluring little number, as apparently model Katarina Leigh Waters is the hottie the titular Vampire Queen was based on. I'd never heard of her, but boy howdy, she's a beauty that loves to brawl. Her Wikipedia page shows a lengthy wrestling career for several promotions, including WWE and Total Nonstop Action. I don't know how she wound up in my D&D module, but I ain't mad at it. Now these proofreaders, well, they did a terrible job. I'm not going to touch on the grammar and spelling problems of this module because they are so prevalent it would eat up the entire review, and we already have plenty to talk about. The silver lining is that it doesn't make the module unreadable or unusable, it's just not professional grade text, and in some places leaves me confused as to what actually happens when. And that's such a shame because this is a high quality production in other regards. It just needs a little linguistic cleanup, and then it would be polished and professional across the board. We get no table of contents and instead jump straight into the 28 pages of adventure ahead, with a few pages of pre-generated characters at the back. Since we're about to ball, I'm gonna drop that hot and spicy spoiler warning on you right now. Chances are, if you care about spoiler warnings in videos entitled RPG Review, your soy latte is tearing you up inside right now, and frankly, you probably don't have the constitution to handle a dungeon crawl as fantastically violent as Hanging Coffins. Oh, tell your girlfriend to call me so she can hear what a real man sounds like. Do what you gotta do, I'm pressing on. So we start off with the author's note where Mark thanks you for purchasing this module and he hopes you enjoy it. In it, he briefly waxes nostalgic for the old days, the early 1980s of the RPG scene. And what he remembers about that is that fun and memorable encounters were the currency of the realm. And so that's what he's aiming for with this module. This is a detailed adventure with a lot of scalability to fit your players and their varying role-playing styles, as well as yours as a GM. I gotta disagree with that because this is an incredibly combat-heavy module, and if you're trying to role-play your way through this, there's not really any options. What do you think this is, Al-Qadim? Moving on, GM background is not really a background of the adventure, it's key characters in the story, but instead talks about the party that should run through this. 2 paragraphs into the module, we get a pretty big discrepancy. Because here it says this module is designed for 8 to 10 characters of levels 10 to 14 plus. So it says 8 to 10 characters. And then the party should consist of at least 3 fighters, 3 clerics, a paladin, 2 magic users, and 2 thieves. That adds up to at least 11 player characters or PCs, and not the 8 to 10 Mark suggests. This even disagrees with the party size listed on the back cover. See, those proofreaders were terrible. Mark mentions you can scale encounters up or down, but doesn't provide any guidance on how to do that like Dungeon Crawl Classics modules do. He just gives us permission to do it, so thanks, I guess. And that's the GM background. Some math that doesn't add up and it's over. We then go into an entire section on pit traps, which emphasizes the save or die spirit written into the module because Dungeoneers love putting traps everywhere. Putting traps within traps, traps that don't make sense, and traps that scar players for life. While the map says where the pit traps are, the DM rolls a d8 to randomize what is at the bottom of each one. So that helps with replayability. There's some creativity in here. We get poison spikes, a gelatinous cube, mechanical razor grinding gears, which is just as awful as it sounds, pits full of vampire fledglings, fire, just fire, and bottomless pits. Let me read you this bottomless pit entry. The player has fallen into a magical bottomless pit and will be stuck falling for eternity, unless they have a ring of feather falling or some other means of escape. Dispel magic cast on the area will dispel the trap. My only gripe here is that a ring of feather falling only slows the rate at which you fall, so it's not going to get you out of a bottomless pit. It just means you fall for eternity, but at a more leisurely pace, probably with less screaming. Then we get a rumors table that probably should have been in the GM background section. Then we get a rumors table that probably should have been the write-up in the GM background section. Players get these rumors as a result of their time as prisoners of the Vampire Queen. Oh, and by the way, that's where the adventure starts, with the players imprisoned by the Vampire Queen. How they got there, why they got there, if that's important to you, then that's your problem. Figure it out. This module ain't telling you how to live your life. The rumors are a standard mix of useful and bad information, and I like rumor tables, so it's fine. Next up is the Wandering Monster section and table, and it goes heavy on demons, undead, and of course bats, because horror tropes. Compared to the stat blocks we have in the pit trap section, I noticed an unhelpful inconsistency. Where some stat blocks in this module provide all the details needed to run a monster, some of them insert see OSRIC page XX to get you the full details. That means I now need to have the OSRIC book handy to run the adventure, And maybe that's expected for me to have it on hand since this is an OSRIC adventure, but if Taormino's going to reference away important parts of the stat blocks, why have stat blocks at all, and not just put the page reference in for every stat block and skip filling them out part, but not all the way? And what's this XP business at the end? The writer gives us base XP plus additional XP to add to the base for each hit point the monster has. So if you were rolling monster HP randomly, this method shows that tougher monsters are worth more XP. That's an acceptable way of putting XP in stat blocks, but throughout the adventure, Taormino gives us the HP for each monster. So he could have just put the final XP value at the end of each stat block. There's really no need for the DM to do the extra math, but that's what we're stuck with. We then move into player's background, but that's a misnomer. It's not a section of prep info for the players to have at the end of the module. It's the opening scene of the module. There's no other player introduction or suggestion on how to hook the PCs into the adventure. It just drops them in. That's a perfectly valid approach. I'm just letting you know the module starts with this flavor text box. So if you want to build interest ahead of time, again, that's up to you. What follows is a solid 1 page of read aloud text, which some people don't like because it turns into a DM soliloquy, and some players mentally check out while the DM is giving them key information. To those players, I say, pay attention. Your life, yes, your life, not your player character's life, depends on it. It has a lot to go over, but it captures what this adventure is about and the feel of it. So I am going to read it to you because it really sets the mood. You aren't sure how long you've been locked in the Vampire Queen's dungeons, but it seems like forever. You now find yourselves being escorted into her main audience chamber by 9 death guards. They all look like former regal knights, but now are skeletal servants of the vampire pits. You and your compatriots are strangers who've never seen each other before, but share a few things in common. You're all scoundrels, scumbags, and prisoners. Each of you are wearing nothing but simple black loincloths, and your hands are shackled behind your backs. Hanging your heads down as you march forward, you notice the floor is a neat black and white checkerboard design and is quite clean. Looking up and around, you see a huge throne made black obsidian and gems by the east wall. Above the throne is a huge bat head made of black stone. This must be the evil bat deity she worships. The walls of this chamber are made of polished mirrors. To the north is a large, sleek, mirrored black door in the center of the mirrored walls, and to the south is the same with double doors. Seated sideways on the throne with her legs casually kicked off one end is Lady Kneeblack, the Vampire Queen. She is in her beautiful, voluptuous human form with flowing black hair and wearing a sexy outfit displaying lots of cleavage. Her gaze is irresistible to both men and women. You try not to look into her eyes. She is staring at all of you wickedly and puffing from a jeweled smoking pipe. It smells like high bottom leaf. Standing next to her on the right is a beautiful succubus, giggling and pouring blood like it is red wine from a diamond chalice on her naked and supple body. She is known as Sin. On the left side, lying in a relaxed position on the ground, is another succubi, eyeing you wearily. Her snake-forked tongue slowly licks out of her mouth and around her lips. She is known as Diabolica. You're all marched into an area in front of the Vampire Queen. The death guards fan out around you all in a U-shaped pattern. She stands up and slowly approaches your group. When she looks into your eyes, you are paralyzed by her gaze and simply can't move as your brain says, "Run," but your body stands still. She slowly circles the group and starts to speak. "Foolish ones, I have brought you here for a special game I want to play." She looks at the clerics/paladins. "Your gods won't save you here. I am your god now." You notice the mirrors reflect you and your group, but not the Vampire Queen, who is about 1 inch away from your faces. She takes a puff off her pipe and slowly blows it on you. It is definitely high bottom leaf. She continues walking and looks at the thieves in the party. "You idiots think you can escape with my treasure," she whispers in one of your ears, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Soon your thieving hands are going to be chopped off by one of my wicked dungeon traps." She looks at the fighters in your group. "And you, strong ones, you'll do well in my vampire pits." "Very well." She laughs and sensually cups her hand up against one of the fighters' mouths. The Vampire Queen continues to circle the group, taunting the magic users. "Your magic will entertain children and commoners, but it won't save you here." She has come all the way around and now stands before you, puffing on her pipe and smiling knowingly. "But you know what? I like you. I think you have spirit, and I like high spirits around here. I've made it very simple for your primitive minds. There are 3 magic keys hidden in my dungeon that will allow you to escape. A sapphire key, a crystal key, and an emerald key. They open the doors to the Chamber of the Hanging Coffins, from which you can surely escape. For my amusement, I will let you roam free in the dungeon with all your original weapons and magic items. If you can find the keys and fight your way out successfully in the final battle, you can go free. She walks back up to her throne and sits down, then snaps her fingers, and your shackles crumble to dust. Your original clothes, armor, weapons, and magic items rematerialize on the floor around you. Here's your worthless junk, but what you have on belongs to me. She smiles and snaps her fingers, and instantly your meager dungeon garb vanishes, leaving you all butt naked before the queen. Her succubi and minions all laugh as you barely get your last boot on before the section of floor you're all standing on vanishes from beneath your feet, and you immediately fall down a long winding slide made of black obsidian. You spin and slide out of control into the darkness of the chute. At this point, we don't want the players to engage the Vampire Queen, Sin and Diabolica, or the Death Guards in combat, but if it happens, run the battle for one round before the players are suddenly teleported into encounter number 1 regardless. So here we get some sloppiness in the module. Besides the linguistic problems, we also get a lot of dictation going on here. For example, it says the PCs don't know each other. Well, why don't they know each other? What if you're using your own characters, in which case this box text is incorrect? And at no point has the module so far told us that we have to use the pregens at the back. And those pregens might be scoundrels, scumbags, and prisoners, but maybe the player characters weren't. And we also get a lot of details about her that the characters wouldn't have a chance to know, but we're just getting force-fed it right here, which I guess is fine. But then there's this weird series where she goes to each of the character classes that are represented and taunts them in ways customized to those classes. Well, what if you don't have some of those character classes in the group? Do you still read the text? Do you skip it? I don't know. And then once we leave the box text and we get that one paragraph down at the bottom of page 5, why do we have to worry about the players attacking the Vampire Queen or any of her minions? Because in the box text, it tells us that she instantly gets rid of them. So there's not a chance for a fight to happen. And the very first room that they wind up in is the high wall maze of the vampire. And yes, look at that map. Yep, that is set up like that. That's pretty cool, I think. It's gimmicky, but it's neat. So what happens in this room, you might ask? Well, let me read it to you, because believe me, it's messed up enough for you to want to hear this. As the party haplessly slides down the chute, spiraling out of control, a dim flickering light can be seen fast approaching. You can still hear the Vampire Queen laughing maniacally. Without warning, everyone tumbles through a 10-foot round hole in the wall at the bottom of the slide and rolls eastward onto a 10-foot wide by 70-foot long walkway at the top of what appears to be a black obsidian wall. You feel intense heat all around you. The Vampire Queen's laughter and voice echoes eerily in the chamber. Foolish ones! You now stand at the entrance of the dungeon level. Death or freedom awaits you. Now walk the high wall maze of the vampire pits. She laughs. You are now coming to your senses as you crash to a stop. But before you can react, fires and flames lick up and down all around you. Wincing your eyes, you can see through the thick waves of heat and smoke that you are in a huge black cavernous room, hundreds of feet wide and hundreds of feet high. Flames and fire can be seen to the left and right of you. All of you now realize you're standing on the top of what appears to be a maze-like pathway that zigs and zags around to the east. As you step forward, you start to slip a bit. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a huge flaming rock about 3 foot in diameter whizzes past you. As you frantically swing around to see where it came from, you see a terrible sight. 3 fire giants off in the distance, about 100 to 200 feet away, are throwing the flaming rocks like meteors. And then the text tells us the fire giants immediately begin to attack when the players get within a 100-foot diameter or eye shot of them. But wait, the box text said they already attacked. Why would they need to wait till... They're already attacking. The combat's already happening. And so to get out of this room, the players have to figure out how to deal with the fire giants that are hurling an unlimited amount of flaming rocks at them, go down the path, and get out of the room. Oh, and if you fall or get knocked off of the path, you can either hit the ground below and crash land onto hot black obsidian rock islands, or into lava pools and rock fires on the ground. And players stuck in the lava or fires must take 1d4 extra damage each round until lifted off the ground level. Well, that's actually not bad for falling in lava. D4, that's like a dagger. That's survivable. And here Taormino tells us that they have to be lifted off the ground level. Well, Can the PCs not climb back up? Are the obsidian walls of the path too slick for them to climb back up? What's the deal here? And once you get out of this room, you go into room 2, the jelly cube monster. And this one I thought was pretty neat. This is a brickstone room lit by eerie green glowing light. The walls are oddly bright green, and the room appears to be a 10-foot wide path that branches out from the center at right angles in all 4 directions. So these walls are actually 4 gelatinous cubes. And hilarity ensues as the players try to deal with them and get out of there. We get 52 rooms in total, so there is way more to this module than I have time to cover. Instead, I'm going to pull out a selection of rooms that really stood out to me and give you a taste of what this adventure has to offer. Room 3, Mirror of the Fools. Upon entering the room, the door closes behind everyone. You blink your eyes and realize the room's 4 walls are nothing but mirrors, and there is now no way out. Your reflections seem normal at first, then they start to move on their own, laughing hysterically and glaring at you. The mirrors suddenly bubble and warp in distorted and freakish shapes. Your duplicates spring forward and smash through the mirrors to attack you. You can swear you glimpsed glimmering jewelry and gems in the shattering mirrors. So now the players will be attacked by doppelgangers. But not just one duplicate of each player character, but 4 for each player character in the room. That is ridiculous. Then the players make it past a room with some ghouls in it, and we come to the room with the arm wrestling minotaur. Yes, you heard me right, arm wrestling minotaur. As you approach the door to the room, you can hear loud, monstrous laughter and cheers roaring from within. If the players decide to enter the room, then read the following. Entering the room, you can see a horde of sweaty and stinking ogre guards huddled around a table, watching their boss Minotaur Goonhand, who is at present arm wrestling a human wearing tattered prisoner garb. There is a pile of gold, copper, electrum, and jewels on the table, as well as small bits of bone that have been fashioned into 6-sided knuckle bones dice. You recognize the human prisoner as Dormog. He is the one who gave you the bad information that caused your first escape attempt to get botched. Uh-oh. You can hear the bones snap and flesh rip as Goonhand rips Dormog's left arm completely off. He screams in pain, and then Goonhand casually tosses the arm into a pile of other arms sitting next to the table on the floor from previous victories. Dormog falls to the floor in a pool of red blood. The monsters jeer and laugh, then all dog tackle him and rip his body apart, limb from limb. Blood splatters everywhere, including the walls and on their hideous faces. They stop laughing as they see Goonhand staring stoically at something. And that something is you. He speaks to you in common.
Now is the time to face me, unless you're scared. I challenge the strongest of you to arm wrestle with me. If you win, I'll let you go on your way to the ultimate death in the dungeon. Or you can choose to fight us now.
And then it says to roll for initiative. So they get right into the fight. So this makes me wonder a few things. One, Dormog apparently gave you bad information that botched your first attempt to escape. And so, well, that's some backstory that we might have wanted to have. And then we get the opportunity to arm wrestle a minotaur surrounded by his ogre goons, which sounds metal AF, but then it says roll for initiative. So why not give the players a chance to actually arm wrestle the minotaur? Then it says if the minotaur loses, then all the other monsters in the room will quiet down and look at each other confused, unsure how to react. Without warning, they'll then dog tackle Goonhand and rip him limb from limb for losing honor, all the while cheering the players. This gives them a chance to escape. But if he loses a fight, then he's already defeated. But if Taormino's talking about if he loses the arm wrestling contest, then see, this is what I'm talking about. A better editing job would have cleared this up, and I would have a clear understanding of what's going on here. But I love the opportunity to arm wrestle a minotaur in a vampire queen's dungeon pit. I'm going to skip past the laboratory of the flesh golem. That is really horrific, and I think that you should enjoy that for yourself. And we're going to go to the riddle of the 7 bats. And yeah, you can see what kind of riddles we're talking about here. This is a 30-foot wide by 40-foot long room made of black stone decorated with small multicolored tiled frescoes depicting various scenes of death, skeletons, caskets, etc. In one area, the northern wall is a frescoed artwork of a full-size door shaped with skulls and bones. The entranceway you came in looks like the only way out. On the north wall is scrawled the following riddle in common. 7 bats are hanging on a cave ceiling. Suddenly, one of them decides to fly off of the ceiling. How many bats are still hanging on the ceiling? And here you get to find out how clever Mark is at making riddles. The answer to the riddle is 7. The bat decided to fly off the ceiling. This does not mean he actually flew yet. If the party gets it right, the door will magically open, revealing a secret passageway beyond. Oh, and he adds, nothing else short of a wish spell can open this door. Holy crap, a wish spell? Not even knock? Oh wait, then in the very next line he says, use your best judgment as to anything the player suggests that you consider an alternative for opening the door. I don't know, man. A wish spell or nothing seems pretty black and white, but now we can consider all kinds of other options. You know, that's internal conflict of logic in your module's not great. And then we get a hallway with a diamond demon in it before we get to the Dinner of the Damned. And I like this one too. You enter a large 70-foot by 60-foot ornate ballroom. The room is lit by 4 huge chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, each with hundreds of lit candles. 4 huge marble pillars dot the room, and on the north, south, east, and west walls hang huge, unique 20 by 20 sized oil paintings of the Vampire Queen depicted artfully nude in various scenes. On the west wall is a painting of her naked riding on a flaming nightmare horse standing at the top of a pile of 1,000 dead bodies of soldiers. On the east wall is another painting where she is again naked with her arms around Demonicus, her former vampire master and lover, who is sitting on a throne. The painting on the north wall is of the Vampire Queen naked, flanked by 2 succubi in a fiery hellscape, with hundreds of vampires worshipping around them. On the south wall is a painting of her naked with her arms around her former husband, King Walla Wally, in his revenant attire on his deathbed. Her eyes in the painting seem to be following you. In the northeast corner of the room is a huge pipe organ made from bones playing music by itself. In the center of the chamber is a large ornate dinner table with about 12 red velvet chairs. On the table is a fire-roasted mutton dinner with all the fixings, vegetables, fresh fruits, breads, and red wine. Also on the table are extra plates, silverware, and jeweled crystal wine goblets for the exact amount of people in your group. As you examine the situation closer, suddenly you hear the booming voice of the Vampire Queen. Foolish ones, it is feeding time. Have a nice dinner of the damned before continuing your travels. I'll be waiting for you in the end. She laughs and seems to find your suffering generally amusing. The velvet chairs at the table all slide back to allow you to sit. And before we get into what else happens in that room, just this flavor text. You got tits, you got death, you got demons, you got violence. This module is very metal, and I love it. So if the players don't sit down and they're standing listening to the music for more than 1 minute, they have to make a save versus magic, and if they fail, they fall under the spell Irresistible Dance and start jiggling into an uncontrollable frenzy, dancing wildly around the room to the music. This is bad. But then we get suddenly 48 vampire minions swoop down from above in waves of 12 every few rounds at the DM's discretion and attack in a massive frenzy. What the hell? Suddenly to what? Them coming in the room? To them sitting down? When is the trigger point where 4 waves of 12 vampire minions come swooping down on the characters? I don't know. The text is unclear. However, the food at the table is completely edible and will heal the players at a rate of 2d8 hit points every 4 rounds they eat, which is a nice touch in a grind fest of a dungeon like this. Then we get a jeweled skull that has more riddles. There's a bat god. There's a statue of a seductress. There's a Medusa garden, and I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but there is this bit right here that concerns me. So there are fungi-like plants in the garden of the Medusa. 100 violet fungi. 100 of them. And they're randomly scattered around the cavern and partially concealed by other plants. So it's random every round that the party's walking around, whether they hit any or not. And anyone within 4 feet of one of these things has to do a saving throw versus poison, or their exposed flesh will begin to rot within 1 round. Anyone who fails their save will require a cure disease spell to be healed. So you're talking about a potential 100 saves versus poison for anywhere from 8 to 12 player characters in this room. That's insane. Just the bookkeeping alone would grind on my nerves because the DM's supposed to make this check every round that the players are in here. But then we get to Vampire Master in the Heartstone. This one's pretty neat. This room is 30 feet by 30 feet and constructed from luxurious black onyx. I guess we ran out of obsidian. In the center of the room is a jeweled pedestal about 4 feet tall with 5 human skulls around its edges. There's a kidney-shaped gem about the size of a man's fist magically floating above the pedestal. Behind the pedestal, along the southern wall, is an altar with a tapestry depicting various occult symbols, circles, pentagrams, stars, moons, crescents, etc. You notice various symbols and arcane magical writings on the walls. At the end of each side of the altar is a burning incense holder. You faintly hear a demonic voice whispering in your ears, "Demonic. We're here. It is time for your freedom and revenge." This gem holds an evil spirit. It's Demonicus, that guy we mentioned earlier, the Vampire Queen's former undead master, whom she magically trapped in the Heartstone 500 years ago. Did I mention this module oozes story potential? I want to hear how that happened. Suddenly, when exactly that is, I don't know. But suddenly, 4 Class C demons, otherwise known as Glabrezu, gate in Two of them shatter the heartstone with their pincers, automatically releasing Demonicus. He screams with rage, "Revenge!" Then looks at your party and speaks, "Don't be afraid. I'm going to kill the vampire queen first." Then bellows with laughter, turns into a bat, and flies away into the darkness like we all dreamed we could do. And then the demons all attack you. And if you defeat them, you get a shit ton of jewels, as a series of random colors, red, green, blue, yellow, and many more, start to emanate from the center of the circle of skulls, as a fountain of jewels rises up from it, spewing dozens of precious gems out in a circle. The gleaming gems rain down over the room, and then we get a pretty obnoxious and hard to read paragraph full of all the gems you get, but you know what? I'm happy to have them. Then there's a cemetery and some death chambers, but then we get to the hanging coffins. Yes, the hanging coffins of the Vampire Queen have their own room. This is a huge 100-foot by 100-foot circled chamber made of blackened stone bricks. The room is over 100 foot high as well. You look up into the darkness and see 9 wicked-looking coffins above you, about 70 feet up. Each is hanging from 4 chains connected to each end. They are hanging in various places, standing still. At about 40 feet up, you can see a black outline of a possible exit mid-shaft. The only way up to the caskets is to fly or climb the walls. If examined, each coffin is made from old, blackened, but ornate wood and carved with various evil faces. If the players open the caskets, they will find 9 death guards, 1 in each casket, who immediately attack the players to the death. In the highest coffin lies a special artifact. It's an intelligent sword named Zargon, the Broadsword, +5. That's quite a name. So I guess his middle name is the Broadsword, and his last name is +5. Anyway, so Zargon, which I appreciate the allusion to Zargon from Lost City and his future D&D career, where he just got more and more badass, will attempt to communicate through telepathy to any evil line characters in the group and urge them to take the sword. If they do it, it will immediately try to possess them, and boy, he is a tough fight to keep out of your soul. And if he wins, he compels them to attack the nearest player character of non-evil alignment, and it will take a remove curse to get rid of him. Oh, the open black holes in the walls of the chamber are actually spheres of disintegration, and will do exactly what they say to any player entering one of them. That's right, into any player entering one of them. Not player character, any player. I warned you at the beginning. When the last death guard is killed, a secret door in the highest southwest corner of the room will open, revealing an escape route. And that reinforces the point I made earlier that though Mark said there's different play styles that can get you through this adventure, there's not really. You have to kill the things that are in front of you. You can't outthink it. You can't find this thing. The only way out of this room is to kill all those death guards. Then we get some more business before coming to another cool room, Prison Ring of the Gatekeeper. This is another unremarkable circular chamber, but with torches every few feet. On the walls are scrawled an elaborate array of magic symbols and markings. You hear moaning coming from around the curve of the room as a monstrous shadow creeps toward you. This turns out to be a frail, 80-year-old human male with white hair and beard. He is wearing black robes and carrying a staff, and has a fancy amulet around his neck. He seems happy to see you, and hails you in common. "I am the gatekeeper, but not by choice. Thank the merciful God you came. It seems like I've been wandering this chamber for years. I couldn't open the door to the outside, and I dare not enter the inner ring because of the beast within." You hear an inhuman howl coming from within that makes the gatekeeper shudder. He speaks in a whisper now.
"An ancient evil is inside that room, trapped in a cage sealed by a magical lock. You must not let it out. If you go inside, it will take a false form to fool you, and it will say and do whatever it must to convince you to release it. Don't believe its promises."
He reaches for his amulet.
"This is the key that could release horrible evils on the world. It is now your task, your burden, not mine. The devil himself is in that cage. Never let him out. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must look for a bucket or dark corner somewhere to take a wicked piss."
That's classy. And that's another thing that recurs throughout the module. Potty humor, juvenile humor. The stuff's fun. It helps set the mood to go with all the tits and the death. Penis jokes, a time-honored part of Dungeons & Dragons. The gatekeeper takes the glowing amulet of eternal truth from around his neck and hands it to anyone in the group that is lawful, preferably a cleric or paladin. And he seems joyous over surrendering the amulet, and he runs laughing and skipping out of the room. He's not going to come back unless the party frees the devil, and then he's going to be mad at the party and curse them for quite a while before having to excuse himself again because his bladder's weak. So who is it he's keeping in place? Well, in Ring of Emilius, the Evil One, we find out. The interior of the ring is a circular room approximately 40 feet around. In the center of the room is a floating cage bound by chains. Inside is a small child that is dirty and malnourished. When he sees you, he scrambles over to talk to you. My name is Emilius, and I'm very hungry and tired. The gatekeeper's a liar and a wizard, and he sent you here to kill me. I can help you. You're looking for something special. 3 keys of jeweled name. I can show you where they are. Use the amulet and release me. You must hurry before the gatekeeper returns. So, spoiler, the child in the cage is actually Emilius the Greater Devil. And boy, is he a bad hombre. He will do or say whatever to gain the trust of the party and attempt to turn any paladins in the group. Turn them into what? I don't know. But he's going to try to turn any paladins in the group. If the players let him out, he'll say, thank you. Now one of you must die. And then he'll transform into a traditional man-sized devil with horn spikes on his head, long black hair, black robes, and cape. You know, the normal. And he'll attempt to finger of death the player who freed him before vanishing. All players hear the Vampire Queen's disembodied voice saying, way to go, foolish ones. You never let me down. I may have you work for me more often. I don't know what that means because this is her dungeon, so why can't she let Emilius out? Whatever. With that, the gatekeeper returns and is aghast that the devil has been set free on the world. What did I just say? What did I just tell you idiots before I left? I wasn't even gone for 5 minutes. He attacks as an 18th level mage. Well, that's screwed up. But honestly, if you're a player character or a party that falls for that after being given that big of a warning, you friggin' deserve the finger of death. And what did he say? The player who released him gets the finger of death. Again, it's coming for you at the table. Not your player character, you. You might remember a mention of King Walla Walla, the former husband of the Vampire Queen. Well, now we found him, and the deathbed of King Walla Walla. This is a large, ornate, and unnerving bedroom presenting a disturbing sight. A huge 4-post bed with a black obsidian headboard, because of course it does, shaped like a pair of bat wings, but of course, it fits the motif, and loaded with jewels is facing you on the east wall. A creepy old wooden black casket sits on the bed. It is open, and inside is a skeleton with long white hair and painted black nails, wearing ornate clothes and expensive-looking jewels sewn in them, as well as an amulet of some value around its neck. You notice there are broken chains around the bed in various locations. Many treasure chests are lined up along the walls as well. If the players go near the bed, roll initiative. They notice the stomach of the skeleton bursts open and spews 100 soul worms all over the party. 100 soul worms with 8 hit points apiece, each with an attack, does 1d4 plus 1 damage all over the party. Good friggin' luck. At the same time, they'll hear a thunderclap. The skeleton on the bed is actually that of the Vampire Queen's former husband, King Walla Walla, who is a revenant. He sits up and his eyes start to glow red. He speaks in an echo. Mortals, you have disturbed my slumber. Now you shall join me in eternal rest. He lunges out his special attack of strangulation on a random party member closest to him. So obviously a fight's going to go down, and all the chests are trapped with poison lock needles. Anyone opening will take 1d4 damage plus Savor's poison or become poisoned. But those treasure chests do pack quite a bit of gold in them, so the risk might be worth it. Then we come to room 26, Coffin Lair of the Vampire Queen. This dark, narrow cavern hallway is especially foreboding. Suddenly you see the end of the passageway buried in a rubble collapsed from long ago. As you go further into the tunnel, you're startled by the sight of a red and gold gilded coffin, sitting on a huge pile of nearly 100,000 in gold and jewels. Before you can get too excited, the coffin door bursts open and out pops Lady Knee Black, the Vampire Queen in her monstrous form. She speaks, "Well done! You have made it to the final battle. Your last chance for death or freedom is now at hand." And she attacks. Roll initiative. Now, Lady Knee Black here, she's a tough customer. She fights as a 20th level fighter and casts spells as a 20th level magic user. And she's already cast spell immunity on herself. She can't be turned. She's got AC of -10, 200 hit points, claw bite, and she got some nice magic items on her that if you can get them off of her, you'll be doing good. Constitution 14. She only has a Constitution 14. What kind of wimp is she? Now we got a massive number of spells that she's got available. She's immune to charm, hold, and sleep spells. Electricity and cold only do half damage. She's immune to normal weapons and regenerates 3 hit points a round. And any hit that she strikes, not only doing damage, and quite a bit of it, will take 2 levels of life energy off of the character, which sucks. Level drain sucks. She can take gaseous form at will. She can shape change into a large bat at will. so she can fly around and screw with the players that way. She can summon bats, rats, underground, and wolves above, although I don't know how that's going to come up because there's no above ground portion of this module. She can charm people, and she will fight to the death. Oh, she can begin gating demons at the start of the battle. That's nice, but we don't really get any details on how that works. So that is going to be a hell of a fight on the player's hands. But Stephen, my dear friend, that's only room 26. You said there's 52 in this dungeon. Is this the end? No, it's not. There's a lot more dungeon left to go. While there's some gruesome and interesting fights along the way, I have a few more rooms I want to share with you that aren't necessarily combat focused. Room 31, a private hell. This octagonal chamber contains large stone slabs and bloody hooks, and is littered with various body parts. From the darkness, you hear sobbing and a voice cry out, "Kill me!" To your horror, you find out the crying is coming from a severed torso of a human male with only one arm remaining. He speaks in common. "Oh God, she got more of you. You poor bastards. You think you're getting out. You're never getting out. I've been through this maze 8 times already. You'd think that death would be a release, but she'll simply bring you back to life to torture you some more. I don't think you realize the kind of sadistic animal we're talking about here. I've been burned, boiled, eaten, dissolved in a cube, turned to stone, had my arm ripped off. I even ran naked through the whole dungeon just so I could be killed easily, and that just made her think of even more grotesque ways to torture me. That's my hand over there." A hand in the corner, being gnawed on by a rat, waves a finger at you. "Now leave me, or kill me, I beg of thee," he says. There's nothing of value here. If players choose to try to heal this character, at GM's discretion, choose one of the pre-generated characters to be the resurrected player. He or she will cynically armchair quarterback the remaining encounters, having already done them. Okay, so this is a great atmosphere, emphasizing just how atrocious and demonic this dungeon is, and then he's petty and spiteful. I mean, it's an interesting combination of humor and horror that I really like. Now, there's also a filthy bathroom with rock grubs that go at... I don't even want to talk about where the rock grubs will get you. Now, there's some other neat stuff, but then we get to the bone bridge over the green goo, room 35. I really like this. An environmental obstacle that I haven't seen before. There is a door to the east and a door to the south. Cutting diagonally along the room is a gooey green liquid-filled pit extending to the opposite of this chamber, separating the path to the 2 doors. The liquid is so murky that you can't see its bottom. The room smells sour. A bridge made of various bones extends from your door to the room's other exit. If the players cross the bridge by foot, it will collapse when they're halfway over it, spilling them into the goo. If the players don't cross the bridge, try to find a way to get a few of them to fall in the goo. Okay, well, that's encouraging. Now, this green goo, it's toxic, and any character falling in will take 48 damage and have to save versus polymorph or become radiated from its evil magic. And once pulled out, if radiated, the player will receive 1d4 of the following d8 rolls to determine effects on them. The player, not the player character, the player, grows an extra eyeball on his or her body. They might grow an extra arm, a leg. The player's voice might change sex. The player's head magically changes to face backwards. Their torso might face backwards. Their legs might face backwards. Their feet might face backwards. Obviously, each effect will be a problem, causing quite a bit of penalties to your dex and hit rolls because of the mutation. It can be removed, but I thought that was pretty creative, and what a dick thing to do to somebody. And then we get to room 49, the chef's workroom, and the whimsy here stood out to me. Unlike in every other room, this doesn't have to have a fight. Entering into the room, you begin to want to vomit from the horrible stench. Dozens and dozens of rotting corpses and body parts sit on various tables and hang from various hooks. Among all the gore and carnage on one of the tables is a solitary, untouched cupcake. It's been carefully crafted and iced to perfection, and looks delicious. Out of nowhere, a fat green ogre with a white apron leaps out wielding bloody cleavers. He speaks,
"I am the Gruel Master, head chef. Try my cupcake. It's a family recipe."
He is covered in gore and filth. And it doesn't say he tries to attack you. It just says, when eaten, the cupcake heals 1d100 hit points. That's pretty friggin' impressive for a cupcake. And then I guess you could just go on your way. And those are the rooms I want to cover, but we do get 5 monster write-ups in the back. But they're just reskins of normal D&D monsters. And we do get a surprisingly awesome new magic item, the Holy Undead Destroyer Spray Device. While it's a clunky name, it's a barrel that can be worn as a backpack. It can hold up to 5 gallons of holy water, which lasts for 25 rounds of continual use, and then can be recharged with more holy water to spray every undead and demon you come across with holy water, burning them where they stand. I think that's cool. It's the holy water equivalent of a flamethrower. Where has this been all my life? Now, if the sheer number of monsters the module throws at the player seemed high to you just from the rooms that we talked about, bear in mind that was less than half the dungeon. The crazy amount of enemies the players have to face stuck out at me, so I did some math. The module's designed for about 11 PCs of levels 10 to 14. Taking the 12 pre-gens in the back, I added up their hit points for a total of 846 for the entire party. I then went through the module and added up the hit point total of the enemies, and where there were variable numbers appearing, I used an average. The monster's hit point total is 12,965. 12,965 enemy hit points. That's over 16 times the amount of hit points of the entire party. 12,965 divided by the 12 pre-gens means each PC is responsible for taking out 1,080 hit points worth of enemies. Most of these enemies can do real damage too, so it's not just a flump massacre. In what world is this balanced? So if you get yourself into this adventure, either running it or playing it, now you know what you're in for. So what would I do with this adventure? Well, I haven't ran or played in it yet. I am interested. So from an academic perspective, I've got two ideas I want to share. If you cut down on the ridiculous amount of enemies to make this a reasonable challenge for a high-level party, you could run this as part of your regular campaign. Perhaps this could be the culmination of the entire campaign, revolving around freeing a land from the bloody reign of terror Lady Kneeblack, the Vampire Queen, has imposed, whether she's been doing it for centuries or if this is a recent conquest. The Vampire Queen is a formidable threat on her own, so she would make a legit big bad. Perhaps the party is crusading against some greater evil or the abyss, a demon prince, something like that. And one of the demons trapped in her dungeon is tied in somehow. Or you plan an artifact in there the party has to get a hold of in order to complete their larger mission. A bad guy throwing a holy or accursed relic in a dungeon owned by the Vampire Queen is a total dick move and a good way of making sure it stays out of the hands of people you don't want to have it. So they're smarter than the average dretch. Maybe the party's in a race against an evil cult trying to free Emilius, the greater devil, from his imprisonment and unleash him on the world. Maybe the disturbed dreams of King Walla Wally speak to one of the PCs, calling out to them for help in avenging himself on his worthless wife. Then the dead king could join the party in the fight against the Vampire Queen. What if someone important to the party or one of the PCs themselves were to be seduced by one of the succubi and lured off to be imprisoned in the larders of the Vampire Queen? So that's one. Second, you could run this as a run and die game like Ghouls and Ghosts and Goblins, where it's challenging as all hell and you're going to die a lot along the way, where you keep the pre-gens coming as the player characters keep getting mowed down by wave after wave of relentless evil enemies in one ridiculous combat after another. There could be fun in that kind of novelty. I'm not sure how well it would pan out though, because with the waves and waves of enemies, the chances for this all to get bogged down as just a grind of combat that drags on for hours, it goes up. It could turn into a slog, and a lot of people don't like that. So you've got options, but you've got good material to work with. And speaking of good, let's talk about the art. The art in this thing is ridiculous. I mean, going from the hanging coffins to the small incidental pieces throughout. Of course, the cover's cool, but then the introductory illustration for the Vampire Queen and her two succubi. Look at this thing. This is like a teenage boy's wet dream going on here. You got all these hot chicks with their tits out, ass out. They're evil, they're menacing, they probably want to kill you, which is kind of a turn on. And there's a succubus pouring blood on her tits. I mean, it works out. And while the styles clash, this fire giant image is pretty damn impressive. That poor bastard getting knocked off by taking a flaming rock to the groin. That's a tough life. And oh my God, look at that. This coffin creep. I am amazed at how much guts you can fit in an elf. Look at that. That's amazing. And then we get our beloved Minotaur, and that's pretty damn cool. I mean, he's badass. And this awesome mimic, and once again with massive tits and a ripped chick that's stabbing the thing to death. I mean, yeah, this can work. And then we got Demonicus himself. Look at this bad boy. Come on, this is some good art. And let's face it, we all wish this was our self-portrait. And you get bits of humor thrown in. This 2-page spread that's got violence, death, players eating it, monsters getting impaled all throughout. There's a lot going on here. It's pretty cool stuff. Since modules by independent creators don't often have much available online in the form of publication history, anecdotes about how the module's been used, all these kind of things I like to share. I asked the writer, Mark Taormino, if he would be kind enough to come on and do an interview to share with us some of those details about what inspired him to write the module. He said yes, and so here we go with the interview. My dear friends, please help me welcome to the show our new dear friend, Mark Taormino. And so, Mark, great to have you. And so we've been talking about your very first published module, The Hanging Coffins of the Vampire Queen. Well, I just want to say first, the title alone is enough to hook me. That sounds amazing. I didn't know about hanging coffins. I didn't know they had anything to do with the Vampire Queen, but you take those words and cram them together. Yes, hook me up with that, because I'm a old horror fan, Hammer, the black and white stuff, whatever. This title would make for a fantastic movie in that kind of horror exploitation genre. So love it. Some great marketing on your part. What was your inspiration for making a dungeon crawl adventure with a demonic vampire queen as the villain?
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for having me as well for the interview. Real quick, it's interesting that you touch upon the title, because that was the very first thing when I was going to write the module. I said, well, I got to have an interesting title. And it's interesting that you have mentioned how much it resonated with you in just the hook of it, because I wanted a title that was clear cut in what it was describing, what the module was going to be, and something that sounded familiar with people, not the Vampire Queen words per se, because I wasn't aware that there was already a Palace of the Vampire Queen thing done like the 70s or something, which I had no idea about. But more specifically, hanging coffins. I wanted something that sounded like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. There's some kind of history thing that kind of sounded familiar, so people might, oh, that sounds familiar, even though the module was brand new. So that's why I came up with the notion of hanging coffins, was based on like the Hanging Gardens title, Babylon. And then it turned out that there was actually a Hanging Coffins of China or something. So that's how I kind of put that together. As far as the Vampire Queen part of it, because I wanted something that I felt hadn't been addressed in the original 1980s, like the yellow stripe ones, the first edition AD&D modules. Those are my favorites. And I never had seen any kind of yellow stripe module back then, per se, specifically having a vampire queen or a vampire boss per se. Now, of course, some modules had them in them, but they weren't the main villain. So, for example, like White Plume Mountain had a vampire guy as just a regular encounter, and I think Vault of the Drow had a vampire and a succubus, but they weren't the main boss villains. So I wanted something that had a main boss villain that was different than any of the old stuff that we had already been through, to make it kind of feel new and unique. And that's how I came upon the notion to do it as a vampire queen, and then the title with Hanging Coffin. Also, I had wanted to be not specifically like Tomb of Horrors, because that's a very non-monster oriented module, but something along the lines of a hardline, ultra-violent, crazy kind of funhouse style dungeon. And that was sort of the thematics of going into it. The notion that the plot line of the story was just simply that she has her prisoners. She said, oh, let's have a game. Let's let the prisoners loose with all their magic items, and that's the adventure. As they go through the adventure, they can survive, they can escape. That concept I had pulled directly from Ghost Tower of Inverness, where the main protagonists were prisoners or something of the Duke of Ernst. I just kind of put all those kind of ideas together and then went with it from there. And the two succubuses as her lieutenants, once again, that came from the notion of, I think, from two things. Number one, the vampire and succubus from Vault of the Drow, Belgos, and he had like a girlfriend like Celissa or something like that. But the notion of the two succubuses came from when I was younger in the 80s, like 15. We used to play in a big D&D group at our local game store. And there was an older guy that was the DM all the time, and he would constantly, like a real low-level party of adventurers, suddenly come across like an 18th level wizard on a dragon or something throwing fireballs at you. And then that guy had two characters named Sis and Sass, two other evil magic users that would show up and do things. So I thought, okay, maybe her assistants will be two succubuses, and I'll name them Sin and Diabolica, which are my original names. So once again, the notion of the Vampire Queen having two female assistants kind of came from my early days of playing D&D.
Oh, that's cool. Since you put such effort into the title, it easily has the same kind of ring as Tomb of Horrors, Isle of Dread, Keep on the Borderlands. Very evocative. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of power in those words.
Yes. Real quick on that notion, I was very fortunate that sort of the template that I ended up kind of putting together for Vampire Queen, the clear-cut title, the over-the-top boss villain, the kind of over-the-top boss monsters below her, all that stuff sort of created good brain work to build the future modules on, because I felt it was very important that the title needs to convey exactly what's going on, and have words that a person understands what's going on. So hanging coffins of the vampires. So we know what hanging means, we know what coffins are, we know what a vampire queen is. The second module, secret machines of the star spawn. Evocative, okay, we know what secrets are, we know what a machine is, we know what a star spawn is. So that's why the titles going forward all have a very kind of specificity about them as far as how they were chosen.
And you touched on something just a moment ago about the vampire queen and her relationships to some of the NPCs that are in the dungeon. And with the succubi, with Demonicus, with her estranged husband, all these relationships are very interesting. And if when I run this thing, I'm probably going to integrate it as part of a larger story. And so I'm
Sure.
probably also going to add in more of those relationship elements of how they got together, why they fight and why they bicker, things that players might be able to use to their advantage. There's a lot to work with in this module. I really like how you thought through it.
Oh, yes, thank you for that. Yes, since that was the first one, I was still kind of like going, what the heck going on? Like, how do I do this properly? Unfortunately, it all worked out. Going forward in future modules, I started developing a little bit more detailed backstories for all the characters. So Vampire Queen, they don't have as much detailed backstories, but there's enough there, I think, for you to work with. At some point, people have asked me to do either a sequel or do an update to it where I add a little bit more, even more backstories to it. But yes, it's very interesting. I tried to structure it that way too. So like the Demonicus, the ex-mass, how she trapped him in the gem and all that stuff, things like that. Also, things just have sort of happened. Like I was like, okay, we got to have the guy that was the master. Okay, we'll put him in the gem. And then it was like, well, how's he going to get out of the gem? The players aren't going to free him. It's like, oh, he was planning a jailbreak with the other demons, and it just boom happens right when the player characters show up, of course. You know what I mean? So that now they have to deal with all that. And then the notion that he's like, yeah, I'm going to go get her with,
And that little wrinkle you added there about he had a planned jailbreak adds to the possibility of, with just a little bit of fleshing out, this could be a higher level version of, say, the Caves of Chaos, where you play factions against each other. Because it's quite a, I don't call it a funhouse dungeon. I term this a grindhouse dungeon, which I figure is a compliment to you and your sensibilities. If a dungeon was directed by Quentin Tarantino or Rob Zombie, that's what this would be.
Okay, yes, that's funny. It's interesting you mentioned that. Sometimes people have referenced that, or they say that these are kind of the Tarantino of modules or something like that. Where I'd like to kind of turn it on its head a little bit as far as the encounters go, sometimes even the backstories. I was originally thinking like it's a funhouse style dungeon, but it's more like a grindhouse style dungeon, really, because there's more monsters in there too and stuff. It's a grindhouse.
So, as your first published module, there's something that really stuck out to me about your production value that goes in it, because a lot of what I'll see in independent publishing is that they really skimp on the art budget because that costs money, that's outside of their control, and they don't know if they're going to make any money or not on this. But this module may have the best collection of art I've seen in any adventure module. So, what inspired you on your very first module to go so hard on quality artists and a lot of work from each one of them?
Okay, thank you for that. That's interesting that you pointed out. When I wanted to do my own module, prior to this, I had always looked at other retro style modules done by either large companies like Goodman Games or all the way to little independent folks. And I felt that when looking at all those, that sometimes the artwork wasn't quite as far. Sometimes I want to make sure that when I did mine, that I just was able to try to select from the best artists that I could have access to. Now, when I started this with this first module and first Kickstarter, we had zero connections in the gaming business at all. I didn't know any artists. I didn't know any cartographers. I didn't know anybody in the business. However, I had backed a bunch of Kickstarters when Kickstarter started around that same time. And some of those Kickstarter folks were cartographers, were artists like Brian McCraney and Jeff D and all the other people, which of course I knew who Jeff D was from the old days. So then I said, okay, well, I knew I could raise the funds on Kickstarter. The initial budget for this project on Kickstarter was only a $2,500 budget, which at the time I was still doing a computer job. I was a computer programmer for like 30 years. So at the time, I had a good computer job. So I knew I could always finance some of the stuff on my own, even beforehand, before the Kickstarter, even if it would go over a budget. at that time. Now I'm able to do the business full time so far since last year, which keep it going, everybody. So thank you for that. So that's how I did. I contacted all these people like through either Facebook or Kickstarter, and like Brian Trainey and Jeff D and all these people. And they all wanted to participate in it. So that's when I said, okay, well, let's get the cover if we can by Jeff D, of course, one of my favorite artists from the old days. And he was like, okay, I'll do it. I was like, what? Oh my God, whatever. So
That's
we
a
did
big
the
deal.
thing. Yeah, it was a big deal because I was like, oh my God. So
Well, he's a
I
great
did.
artist. He's a good RPG designer on his own too. He knows how to make the games, he knows how to run the games, and he knows how to depict the games.
Right, exactly. So I was very fortunate, yeah, to be able. It was a very, very fortunate timing for me that everybody just happened to be available at that time period and want to work on the project. So I was very fortunate with that. So he came on board to do the cover, and then Brian and all these other folks came along, and so I just went ahead and kind of went crazy with doing as many pieces of artwork as I could. Now, the very first version of it, maybe had a little bit less artwork, but it was still all high quality. Now I had put in even more over the years. I slowly would add even a little bit more in there as well. So the modern version now has a full-blown centerfold and all this stuff, and a lot of stuff by Carlos Castillo. The wonderful job of this beautiful centerfold pieces. And I try to put a centerfold now in every module, which I retroactively had even added centerfolds into some of the older ones. So I just tried to get the best artists as I could. The first maps, so Vampire Queen, and the second book, the Star Spawn, and third book, Undercity, I pretty much designed all the maps myself, and those just would draw them on like old fashioned the map, and then give them to the professional photographer to make them into what they are on there. But as far as the choice of doing it, it was because I just felt a lot of those retro modules. I would always look, like I said, on eBay and all these places to find like independent retro modules, and I bought all the Goodman Games ones. But I would always notice that lacking kind of that artwork kind of standard. Some of them had some few good pieces of art. Some of them had art where I was like, why are they putting that in there? You know what I mean? Almost looked not very good. Like just have my friend draw a picture or something, and it wasn't
It,
quite.
it's helpful if you're writing anything, whether it's a novel or an adventure, to establish in the reader's mind what this world feels like, what it looks like. And so if you can pull it off just with the quality of your prose, good on you. You can skip the art. I've seen some examples of that. But at least a couple pieces of art to
Right.
center you on the vibe of the product is incredibly important. And you went overboard. There's so much to work with.
Right. Oh, thanks. I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I want to do this the best possible way. When I was doing that, I chose all the best artists I could, the best map makers at the time I could. I still had no idea how it was going to be received. You know what I mean? When I ran the Kickstarter for it, originally, because I knew that the budget would be a situation with Kickstarter, because if you don't reach your goal on Kickstarter, you don't get the money. So, because at first I was like, well, maybe I'll set the budget for 10,000 on Kickstarter. That sounds like a good idea. And then I realized, no, I could cover any extra expenses myself. Let's drop it down to 5. So I was like, I'll do it at 5,000. That sounds pretty good. And I was like, well, the reality here checked in. I'm an unknown author. Nobody knows who I am. I don't have any connections to business. Let's just get it down to 2,500, which really barely kind of covered the stuff. Even just the cover art alone is almost half that, to be honest. You know what I
If
mean?
you
As
don't
far as
mind me asking, how much did you wind up spending on art for this module? Because it looked like a spare no expense kind of situation.
yeah, because even just the cover art alone back then, it was around like 900 or something for just that particular
It's
piece.
Jeff D.
Yeah, Jeff.
He's worth
Now
it.
he charges more, of course. Yeah, because it's gone up. Now I think he's around like 1,300 or something, maybe. Or it depends on if you want an acrylic or a watercolor from him. So I think he's like around maybe like 12 or 1,300 now for acrylics, and maybe watercolors are 800. And if you're wondering what a watercolor from him looks like, Village of Hamlet, that was a watercolor. That's why
Okay.
that module always kind of looked a little different in those colors on the cover.
Hmm.
So just the art budget alone, if you take it over the years, it easily was almost up to $2,000, really. I mean, but overall the years cumulative from all the initial art I got and all the extra art I had added to it, it's just the centerfold alone is almost another like 200 to 300. So almost about $2,000 probably over the years on the artwork. And then the cartography stuff was probably another couple hundred. What was interesting too, one thing about the reception of it. So when I ran the Kickstarter, like I said, I had no connection to the business. I had only just friends and family on my Facebook. So as I was running the campaign, I had set it for 2,500. And this is a good lesson for other folks that want to do Kickstarters, because sometimes they'll say, I want a $10,000 budget, or I want $1,000. They'll come with some crazy number. But The problem is if you don't reach your budget on Kickstarter, you don't get the funding. That's why I set it for 2,500, which was a more realistic goal, and I ran it for 30 days. And it took about 25 days to get even close to 2,500. It was just shy of that, and we weren't quite sure still if it was going to make it. And then what happened was a telltale sign as your excitement about the project was suddenly I had backers that would tell me, "Oh, you got to create more higher reward levels. You got to like a signed version that'll give." In other words, we want to give you more money. Well, you got to create reward levels that'll do that. So I said, okay. So I added some more reward levels. We were still getting close to that $2,500 threshold, but it was like day 25 still. We hadn't reached it yet. So then what happened was I had backers suddenly telling me, these random strangers that didn't know me. I didn't know them at the time. Now they're all longtime supporters of mine. A couple different people emailed me and like, hey, listen, if it looks like you're not going to hit the goal, I will make you hit the goal. I will add in more money just because to push you over the line, so this project will reach its goal and be successful.
That's great, man. They have supporters like that.
So that was great. Yeah, once again, they didn't know. Neither of us knew whether the thing was beyond once it got published. It was even if they were even going to like the thing.
Now, which one of the artists that you worked with had the honor of doing the full page of Lady Knee Black and her two succubi? Because that chef's kiss of metal darkness.
Okay. Yes. That was done by Brian McCraney. He's a comic book style artist. And I was so fortunate to have him on board to do that. That particular picture was, I had thought of exactly that. I had drawn a bunch of stick figures, like the Vampire Queen on like a throne, just like stick figure art, like with the legs kicked off to the side, everything with the smoking pipe and the two succubuses a certain way. And then he did his amazing work drawing that image. And then he added the bat thing. I didn't think of the bat thing, but he added that bat thing behind her. And that was Brian McCraney. And he's done a lot. You'll notice a lot of his work in those early modules. He's kind of taking a break right now from doing a lot of commissions, but I still have some more of his existing work that he had done for me that are going to appear in a few more upcoming modules.
And so for the Vampire Queen herself, Lady Knee Black, you got wrestling star Katarina Waters to model for her? Am I understanding that right?
Yes, exactly. That was once again another kind of out of the blue thing. Some people might know this and some people might not, but my main career was a software engineer for 30 years. But on the side, over the last 30 years, I've also been an actor in movies and TV and films and videos. Before I did Vampire Queen, a couple of years before, about a year before it, I was working on a film script and I was going to produce a feature film. And I had put out some casting notices for actresses and actors to come in and audition for me to do like a still photo shoot to put together like a project plan for a movie I was doing. And Katarina was one of the many actresses that had sent in to do this photo shoot thing for this totally different project about a movie. I didn't quite realize it when I had her come in along with other ladies to audition for this film type project first. And then I ended up casting her in the film project photo shoot thing. And we just became friends. I didn't realize she was a big WWE wrestling star. She goes by the name of Winter, I think, and something else in the wrestling world. And then when I started doing Vampire Queen, I said, hey, you know what? What if I made a live action photo of the Vampire Queen to offer that like with a signature or something? So I thought, oh, okay, Katarina would be perfect for that because I was already had been friends with her from that photo shoot project that we did. And so I called her and I told her and said, oh, yeah. So we arranged the deal and then she came over and we did the photo shoot of her as the Vampire Queen. And then after that, did another project for me. In 2014, 2015, 2016, there was a Doritos Crash the Super Bowl contest where you could film like a Doritos commercial and send it to a contest. She appeared in one of my Doritos commercials and some other little projects. And then she did a short film project, cast me in it as one of the main characters in her film. We've been friends over the years now, and we still want to work together on other future projects as they come up. And then it turned out I didn't quite realize that she was this famous wrestler person. Then when I started watching her video, I was like, what? She's like throwing people around, spitting them.
That's so cool.
Like full Nelson. Yeah.
And I think it adds to the substance of Lady Knee Black is that she's modeled on a hot chick that beats up other people for a living. It's cool.
Yeah, thanks for that. Exactly. I thought, well, who better to visually represents her and has an attitude along with that can represent that character. And I said, oh, wow, she's perfect for that. So if I ever did do a feature project, she's actually perfect for that as well. So
that's great. And you met her because you were trying to do something. And that's how you make things happen. You try to do stuff, you establish connections with people, then you all together make things happen. That's how this works. So folks at home, pay attention. This is how you do great things.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was just totally organic, just sort of happened, and then she was the right person at the right time, and she was right there. We
And my dear friends, that's what we have time for with Mark today. So Mark, appreciate you coming by. Thanks for the neat module and thanks for all this backstory.
Oh, thank you for having me on the show. Thank you. Anytime.
Overall, I liked it. All it needs is just a little editing to clear a few things up, but the material is good. The foundation that Mark gives you to build on is ample, and I will review more of his modules in the future. Hanging Coffins of the Vampire Queen is available as a PDF on DriveThruRPG and in print form from darkwizardgames.com. And I want to plug ordering the actual physical form, not just because I like physical copies more than I like digital copies, but DriveThruRPG.com does not have the print-on-demand option. Even if it did have the print-on-demand option, though, you're not going to get the nice thick cover that separates from the module and gives you this sweet map. This is a hallmark of old school design, and I think Mark did a good job with it. It's a beautiful product. My dear friends, it feels good to tell you about an adventure written by someone in this hobby for all the right reasons, for love of the game, and who wants to show people a good time. Given how nearly every big corporation treats its customers these days, this is a breath of fresh air. So do it. Go ahead and support independent creators like Dark Wizard Games, because it's people like him and other independent creators that keep this hobby alive for the people who love it and will play it beyond it just being a Stranger Things fad. If you enjoyed this review, I too enjoy it when people like and subscribe, so you know what to do. And there was a lot going on in this module, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on it in the comments below. I read every one of them and I respond to them all. And so as we dear friends part for now, I wish you nothing but the best.
Do you have any other specific questions about it, or
Oh, geez. There's
the
so much in it. We could do like an hour just talking about it, going room by room, honestly.
yeah,
Um, that's, that's why it took me so long to do this review, is because I had to figure out what I wanted to cover and what I would have to leave out to get even like an hour of runtime.
right.